But as for who leaked it, yeah, I think it's likely it's a liberal law clerk or someone connected to them. But if a liberal leaked this, thinking that somehow it would lead to a pressure campaign, which would result in one of the 5 justices reversing their opinion, they're deluding themselves. It makes it much harder now for one of the conservatives to change their mind. So I think that a conservative law clerk or justice had more rational incentive to do it. Still probably one of the libs. I don't know. Joining us now is Jeremy Stahl, senior editor for Slate Magazine. He published an article this morning titled, "Who Leaked Samuel Alito's Draft Opinion Striking Down Roe v. Wade and Why?" Also with us is Sarah Parshall-Perry, a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you to both of you. Appreciate it. All right, Jeremy, let me start with you. With what you believe is the most likely scenario here. You laid out in your article 4 different scenarios. What do you think is the most likely one?
I think you're right that the cleanest and simplest explanation is that it was a progressive law clerk who did this as sort of a last-minute desperate gambit to, inspire public opinion against this looming decision and to hopefully attempt, in their view, to sway one of the 5 justices who have agreed to rule and strike down Roe v. Wade to change their minds. That is the simplest explanation.
Now, in your article, you lay out the possibility that it could be a conservative or liberal justice who is actually behind this?
Yeah, I think one other very plausible explanation is that a conservative justice who strongly supported this opinion decided that there was a chance that somebody might get cold feet, and there was a concern that somebody might get cold feet. So in order to potentially lock them in, to put out there that this is what's going to happen unless somebody goes soft, they could have potentially leaked this and put this out there. And it has a whole other range of other benefits from a strategic perspective for that person, in that it distracts the issue. It changes the issue, as you have seen with all the clips you just played, from the looming end of this 50-year precedent and the constitutional right to an abortion to this question of who done it.
Am I just naive then to think there's no way one of the justices could actually be behind this?
Well, I think that I agree with you, Dan, that it's less likely that a justice is behind this, but I don't think it's implausible. I don't think it's impossible. You can just look at the biggest leak of the last decade or so, when the Obamacare ruling came down shortly after. We learned that John Roberts had switched his opinion on whether to strike down the individual mandate. And that information clearly came from one of the justices. So they are not above leaking secretive deliberations.
All right. Let me bring in Sarah here. Do you think that it is clear that that it was likely on the liberal side? But do you also agree that if the person did it, they're a fool for thinking that they could get one of the conservatives to somehow cave to pressure?
Well, I'll take the first part of your question and let you know that all of the outcomes here are most likely those to benefit a liberal-leaning House of Representatives or Senate. And definitely the party in power in the White House. It will most likely galvanize the base going into midterm elections. It will increase calls for court packing, for a Supreme Court code of ethics, for codifying Roe versus Wade, for protecting abortion rights going forward. If there was any attempt to sway any of the justices on the presentation of their opinion or their rationale, it is highly unlikely to have that outcome. In fact, based on Chief Justice John Roberts' statement today, he made clear that it was not going to have any impact on their work whatsoever. And if anything, it will most likely entrench the way the justices are currently leaning. In fact, Justice Amy Coney Barrett herself has said in a speech at Notre Dame Law School that they are not a bunch of partisan hacks. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, during oral arguments, talked about a political stench. The justices are trying to do everything possible to keep that arm of the federal government out of the political fray.
So let me ask you, Sarah. You mentioned the midterm elections, right? It would seem to me that any rational liberal, right, who is trying to impact the elections would wait, right? Would say, let's let the opinion come down closer to the time of the midterms, because we know that voters have very short memories. So why would they try to do it now as opposed to let the opinion come out a couple months closer to the midterms?
Well, I can theorize that, yes, some of the steam may dissipate by the time midterm elections roll around for an opinion that is released at the beginning of May. But by the same token, what it does do is foment continued rhetoric coming from Capitol Hill on things like court packing and like a code of ethics for the federal judiciary. In fact, by a leak itself, it makes the argument for the left-wing base that we need a more policed judiciary, when in fact, the judiciary is fully capable of policing itself. And in fact, Chief Justice John Roberts' year-end report on the judiciary indicates all of the significant changes they've made to tighten the belt in the Supreme Court and in the federal judiciary.
Jeremy Stahl, what do you make of the argument, put aside whether it was trying to influence one of the justices, but that maybe it was trying to influence the Congress to say, hey, if Congress is going to act, they got to act now, they got to act sooner. So liberal leaks it to try to get Congress to act?
I mean, that seems like even more naive gambit than one that would try to sway a single justice to move out off of their current position. Because, as you know, the Democrats only control 50 votes in the Senate. It's an evenly divided body. They do not have the votes to overturn the filibuster for anything. This is not going to change that. This is not going to increase pressure to change that. In terms of a tactic, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That doesn't mean that person didn't do it anyway.
Right.
People do things that don't make sense all the time.
Well, I think we can all agree that whoever did this is an idiot. They're an idiot for having done it in the first place. So as a result, maybe we shouldn't presume some level of, wise thinking on all of this. But Sarah and Jeremy, thank you very much for coming on the program. Good conversation. Appreciate it. Coming up now, the focus turns to what. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.